Hello, friends. Welcome to Akulmach Live, and I am CK. Today, we are discussing about why the billionaires of the world today are racing with each other. We know that there is a space race going on among the countries. A lot of countries are competing against each other to reach to the moon first, establish the lunar colony. However, there is another kind of race going on in the billionaire world, and that is about taking the internet to the space. Why they are racing? Why there is a big hurry to excel over each other? What is the big deal about it? In today's video, we will understand this. First, before we start this discussion, let us now look at the billionaires which are basically fighting with each other or sort of competing with each other, racing to reach this space, bring along the internet, and set up their satellite network. Who are these people? Well, the list is ever growing. However, as of now, these are the top names. In fact, one or two plus and minus. So, Mr. Elon Musk, Starlink, Mukesh Ambani, which is the geo satellite, which is going to be launched very soon. Sunil Mittal is OneWeb. OneWeb. OneWeb is an American company which was acquired by, American satellite company, acquired by a British company, which was both of them then acquired by Airtel, which is going to launch the satellite internet services very soon in India. Jeff Bezos, we know that, the Bezos guy. Richard Branson, he is also an investor in the OneWeb. So, give or take one or two names, as I said, there are a few more, but these are the main contenders of the satellite internet. But before we get into nitty gritties of why these guys are racing and competing, even though they are already billionaires, they already have so many businesses, but why they are racing with each other to set up their own network and create the internet services? Let us first understand why or what is your first impression when you talk about internet. Don't you think that today you think the internet comes from the sky? That means there are a bunch of satellites and you are getting your internet through these satellites, which is a common belief. Whenever we think of some sort of internet, it appears to be coming from the sky. That means we already assume that there are satellites, there are already things happening in outer space, and that is how we are watching this video, for example, live right now on the internet. But I like to clarify to you that this is not true at all. This is absolutely wrong. The internet is not coming via satellites. In fact, the internet is coming via the undersea cable. Undersea cable, and this is a map of all the cables that are fiber optics in nature, which have been laid by various companies, and these are the cables which are running your internet. Now, it is very interesting to see that how these under the sea cable is uh, you know uh, connecting all of us worldwide into a worldwide homogeneous network, and simply because these are fiber optics, and fiber optics are very crucial for our internet, simply because the as the name suggests, fiber optics is basically the bunch of light which is transmitted through the cable. And since it is light which is traveling, not the electricity current, then the speed at which the information is flowing is the speed of light. Now, imagine if you meet an alien, and if you tell them that, look, I communicate using light, only light, which is the purest form of energy. And if they also tell you that, yo, we also use light, then obviously they will no longer be alien, because there is some similarity between aliens and yourself. And you will feel very great that humanity is not far behind in technology, because you're using light. So we're not discussing about fiber optics, but fiber optics is a main part of internet services. And if there were no fiber optics, then we wouldn't have such a vast uh, network of information highway. And this is ever growing, although it is very tedious to lay the fiber optics. Yet this seems to be the viable option, not the satellite, because this has been figured out that if you have the fiber optics, even though it's very tedious, very expensive, and very cumbersome to lay the cable, still this is the best method, not the satellite. So why all the billionaires today are competing and taking the internet from this to the satellite network? In order to understand this in depth, we have to look at the issues that plague us. One is the bandwidth. I think you might have heard about this word bandwidth. Bandwidth is the thickness of the pipe through which some sort of current is flowing. In our case, it is the information in the form of packets which are being transmitted using light, right? So if there are a lot of information is coming from this side and the pipe thickness is small, obviously it cannot fit all the information. That means the bandwidth had to be increased. That is when humans realize that if this bandwidth is not sufficient, then I will have to lay another cable. So this is how the cables have been laid globally today. Uh, so if you take your internet to the satellite, to the space, bandwidth issue is the major driving factor. So if you spend billions of dollars launching all these satellites, but if you do not have the bandwidth in your satellite internet, then cable remains the best option because it provides you enough bandwidth, enough speed, and enough room for information to flow. Therefore, this is one issue which I think the billionaires or their respective companies have been able to solve. That means you can take the internet to the sky and not rely on the cumbersome process of laying the cable underground or under the ocean currents, and you can take them to the space-based satellites and provide solution to the bandwidth and probably more better speed than the cables can currently offer. So this is one issue which the internet services from the space will have to overcome. What is the next issue? Next issue is the latency. What is latency? Latency is the speed at which you communicate. You have the bandwidth amount of information that can fit in into your pipe, and what is the speed of this information that can flow. If this pipe is taking too much time to take the information from point A to point B, that means there is a high latency. The expectation of humans who are using internet today is that they don't have patience to wait for more than 20 to 30 milliseconds. Anything beyond latency of anything beyond 20 to 30 milliseconds is basically observable, and that gets on the nerves of the user. So the latency has to be perfect. That is why the fiber optics is used, because it provides the least amount of latency. It's instant, because the fastest thing in the universe is the speed of light. So your information travels through the pipe at the speed of light. That means latency is not an issue if you have a cable. How do you solve this issue? Using the radio waves, which are slower than light, and then they have to go to the sky and then beam down in a different part of the world, and yet it maintains the latency maybe equal to the cable or better. So this is another challenge that satellite internet companies have to solve, and why these billionaires are racing, simply because they have been able to find a solution to this issue. So what could be the solution? The solution is the lower Earth orbit, LEO, lower Earth orbit, because we know that there is a point between Moon and Earth where the pull of the Moon is equal to the pull of the Earth. That means if you place a satellite, it will always be focused on that particular point on the Earth. This point is called geostationary point, and this orbit is called geostationary orbit. So if you put a very powerful satellite in a geostationary orbit, you achieve many things. You actually have a satellite, very big, powerful satellite. One satellite can actually cover the entire country, and if you place them there, then they will always move along with the Earth. That means they are not taking an orbit, and they will not disappear. They will always be pointing towards that position on the Earth. However, the geostationary orbit is quite far, almost more than 33,000 kilometers from the surface of the Earth. That means the signal will have to travel all the way to the geostationary satellite, and then it has to come back to the same point, and then that will take some time, and therefore both issues like bandwidth and latency will be affected. That is why the geostationary satellite could never scale up to internet. They were very good for television transmission. They were very good for your normal radio communication. But in a TV transmission, you don't care about latency. However, when you're actually live on the internet, then definitely latency and bandwidth become a big issue, and therefore these stationary satellites cannot scale up to the internet. That is why you need a separate system which is putting all the satellites, internet satellites, in the lower Earth orbit. And when you're putting them in orbit, that means they'll always be in the orbit and they will keep roaming around. And the drawback of putting things in lower Earth orbit is that the speed of the satellite will be very fast. That means you cannot put them in one location on this Earth. They will just move around. Therefore, you have to put a constellation of satellites. Many satellites in space, in lower Earth orbit, anything which is like 300 to 500 kilometers or up to 2000 kilometers is considered lower Earth orbit. And you place your satellites there. Even if they move around, there are several satellites. One will move away, other will come in the same position, and a user on the ground will not see a difference whether the satellite has moved, because these satellites will be interconnected. So this is something which is companies like Web1 or Starlink or Geo satellite network, they are trying to put their satellites in the lower Earth orbit. And these are all not single one big satellite. There are multiple smaller satellites, so that they are designed to interconnect with each other, and there will be no difference between if the satellite moves away. The service has to be provided on that piece of planet, and therefore they can cover a much wider region rather than depending on the cable. Remember, laying cable is a very very investment intensive effort, even though it is the best option today. But you need shipping companies, you need digging to be done, you need to lay a lot of cable, and then if you just put one satellite with some sort of plan in place, then that's it. You are solving the cable laying problem. Also, you're protecting yourself from the environmental catastrophe 100 200 years down the line. You don't need to basically dig things and lay cable underground when you can put a satellite in overhead, and that will resolve some of the climate issues also. So the solution is the lower, put some satellite constellation in the lower Earth orbit, which will be a viable solution. It will actually solve your bandwidth issue. You can connect something using airwave, which is very close by, just over your head, 300 kilometers away from you, which is okay, and use the radio wave. So you actually solve the bandwidth issue. How do you solve the latency issue? So these companies have come out with a solution where the latency issues are actually handled between these satellites, where there are no radio communication happening between these satellites. Since they are above the atmosphere, there is no disturbance between the satellites. The satellites communicate with each other using light waves. The same old light is used to communicate, to establish network connectivity between two satellites or more than two satellites which are in the lower Earth orbit. So that way you are solving the latency issue also. So you are providing very high bandwidth. You are also providing latency issue, and you are actually having a satellite constellation. Now the technology is so advanced that you can launch multiple satellites in single launch, up to 100 satellites, sometimes 150 satellites, which is creating a huge constellation. Now all these companies are rushing to do this, and there is going to be economic impact. Why economic impact? Because today, if you lay cable, your internet will reach where you have the cable. Now it may not be viable. If you are a large city, then laying cable is fruitful. It is much more beneficial to lay a cable, because then using the same fiber optics, you can provide services to thousands and hundreds and thousands of users. But if you are in a rural area, the cost of laying cable will be the same, but then you will have fewer customers there. Therefore, it is not profitable to lay the cable, and therefore, if you talk about taking the internet to rural areas or up country, then it is not viable, and that is why we still do not have a good steady internet when we move out of urban areas. And this is one problem that the satellite internet can solve. If you have a satellite internet coming from the sky, you can go anywhere, and You can go anywhere and you will still be connected. And this is a very big deal because what happens is that if you are connected always, then you don't have to really bother about which location on the earth you are. And then you will be always be connected. We will be always consuming information, providing information, charging for information, or paying for information. So definitely, if you have the overall connectivity on every piece of inch of your country through this constellation of satellites, it will actually create new services. It will create new entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs need not live only in urban areas. You can have entrepreneurs living in rural areas, and there will be equal opportunity for everyone. And this trend of people moving from rural areas to urban area in search of job will also disappear, because you can be anywhere, access the internet, access the information, and yet be productive wherever you are. You don't have to shift your location from uh, rural area to urban area in order to be successful. Definitely, this is a very big social and economic impact, and in a long run, this is absolutely a new frontier. That is why the billionaires are racing to establish their own internet services, which is being beamed from the sky. And therefore, this is one good reason, because billionaires always chase the money, and this is one big money that they are chasing, and everybody is competing. I mean, this is the next frontier for them. All right. So these are the things which are driving the billionaires to sort of race with each other, establish the space-based satellite services so that they can rope in more and more people, not only the urban people, but also everybody, all citizens of a particular country or the world, to start using the internet. That will bring the cost of the internet down even much more cheaper than what we have today, and accessibility from anywhere. And therefore, if you have more number of users, you actually tend to gain a bigger market share. And for billionaires, business is everything. That is why they are running for it. So friends, I've tried to explain why there is a space race going on in terms of setting up the satellite internet based services. I would like to know what you think about it. If you have an opinion or a question, please do not hesitate to send it across. Thanks for watching me live. I will catch you again very soon in the next one.